All right, we're back. And our last speaker of the evening is Frank Dempsey, who's going to be talking about the RASC Toronto Centre Telescope Loan Program, recent additions, and some notes. Frank?
Okay, thanks, Tom. Sound check seems to be okay. And so just a very brief illustration here. I only set up 6 slides. It was intended to be a very brief announcement. And so in case you're not aware of the telescope loan program, I just want to point out that there are some telescopes that the Toronto Centre loans out to members upon asking, and there are several of them. There's some photographic imaging equipment as well, but it's not covered here. I'm only here to talk about some visual observing telescopes that I want to make a few details about, and they're illustrated here. So the Schmidt-Cassegrain on the left, I have at home. I lend it out. Dobsonian, I used to lend that one out too. I found another volunteer to handle it right now. And you see Coronado solar observing scope on the right-hand side for looking at the sun. So those are 3 scopes I'm aware of for visual observing. If you look on the telescope loan program website, there's actually an 80 millimeter refractor, but I don't know its condition or where it is. And I have to say very politely, the website is not perfect, and it's not totally up to date, and it's not 100% perfect. So I'm showing you what I'm aware of because I maintain these instruments. So that's the first slide. Some new additions that came in recently. I want to point out. The 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain or 200 millimeter Schmidt-Cassegrain you see there in the middle is another one that we got, and that's the one that I have. I've been loaning out for the past couple of years. I'd have to say it's quite a non-ideal instrument for a beginner who wants to use it. And some of the people who've loaned the telescope from me have been young mothers with daughters, maybe 10-year-old, 12-year-old daughters that are extremely excited about morning boreal telescope. But this telescope is totally inappropriate. It's pretty heavy, and it does take some muscle to handle it. If you don't have good back and shoulder muscles, then this might be a bit of a problem. And that's my impression of it. So I was glad to see when this scope on the left became available from Tony Horvatin a few weeks ago. It's a 4-inch f8, approximately f8 Newtonian, or actually it's a Dobsonian. You may be familiar with the Dobsonian, but point is, it's very light. It's a very excellent telescope made by Steve Dodson. You may or may not have known Steve Dodson that used to make these commercially. Made some really excellent telescopes, excellent telescope maker. This is a homemade telescope, as you can probably see. But the point is, it's a really excellent telescope. I'm looking forward to lending it out to people who want to use a telescope for the first time because it's lightweight, easy to handle, easy to point. It gives really sharp, excellent images. So I'm really excited about this. It's not quite perfect, so I want to point out a few little slight problems in another slide or two. The 8-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain you see in the middle, LX50, it would be good too. And its optical quality is superb. It gives really spectacularly sharp images. I really love it. There's a few little problems with it why it's not operational, and I'll have to do some work on it to get it ready. So it's not yet ready to loan out. I actually pointed out a few at the bottom right-hand corner where I pointed out that it's missing a star diagonal, which you basically need with a Schmidt-Cassegrain. And the other arrow on the left points out a broken bolt on the finder scope mount, which is not critical. So I can fix that in all day. So maintaining these instruments to loan out takes a bit of mechanical know-how, and so I'm not afraid to drill and tap holes in wood or metal and install a few bolts here or there or whatever it takes to do it. So you see this 5-inch Meade Newtonian pictured on the upper right. That tube came with a mount. A guy rescued it from the garbage. He said it was in the garbage, put out for the garbage on the curbside for garbage pickup next door or across the road from where he lives. Anybody want it? So I said, yes, I'll be glad to rescue it and fix it up and loan it out and donate it to the telescope loan program, because I think a 5-inch Meade Newtonian is an excellent telescope for beginners or anybody. I'll show you why in a minute, why I'm slightly prejudiced toward 5-inch telescopes. But the focuser is broken. So you see I put another one there I found from my collection right beside it. So I've put that into the picture too. So I have no problem replacing the focuser. I'm planning to get a mount. Somebody's going to donate a mount. So the broken equatorial mount that it came with is also not a problem. So I mentioned a slight problem with that Newtonian or Dobsonian. That is that although it's not pictured, it has a mount for a Rigel Quick Finder. So some of you may or may not be familiar with a Rigel Quick Finder. It's a very good pointing device. So the one that came with this one is broken, doesn't work. And it's not the sort of thing that you can take a screwdriver to and adjust and fix. It's a sealed little plastic unit. So I got a problem with that, but I'll mention what I want to do about that. Let's see if this works. I want to mention that if anybody has small telescopes like these, they want to donate or no longer using or don't know what to do with anymore, they'd be really useful in the telescope loan program. So I put these pictures of my telescopes because I think they're really nice. So I have a lot of telescopes that are in the 4 or 5 inch range. So I just pointing out some. You see the one on the left is an 80 millimeter refractor. There's probably lots of them. Probably a lot of people have them lying around. They're not using them anymore, and they've replaced them with bigger scopes. And they said, "What? This isn't worth much money, and I don't know any use for it." But I'm telling you now that it would be very useful in the telescope loan program to loan out to first-time telescope borrowers who don't have huge, strong, powerful back and shoulder muscles to handle a Schmidt Cassegrain. Anyway, I wanted to illustrate that's also a fairly old-fashioned manual equatorial mount. So that rig on the left is one that I use for put a solar filter on. I make daily sunspot observations with that. I've been using that rig for at least 10 years. It's really darn good. It's really darn useful, really easy to use. The arrow points to a block of wood. And so I can easily adapt any telescope from whatever onto, put a Vixen style dovetail bar onto it and a Vixen saddle or a base onto the mount by means of a block of wood. And really, it's just too easy to attach it. So I can attach any old telescope to an equatorial mount that gets donated pretty easily. So I pictured also 102 millimeter Celestron Omni refractor. I picked that one up a few years ago, and I decided that's really excellent telescope. It's really darn nice. I see them advertised now for sale for less than $200, on the range of $100 to $200 for an optical tube assembly. I think it's phenomenally good telescope. So again, it's one that people might have lying around, not knowing what to do with, saying it's not worth much, but I want you to know that it's pretty darn good for a first-time telescope user. So it's pictured here on my Celestron CG4 mount. I think that's such a good mount. I happen to have 3 of them, and why is a long story, but the point is that's a good telescope to illustrate. You see on the upper right, 127 millimeter Maxitov Cassegrain. They're also fairly popular, I think, and so I don't think there are a lot of them lying around that people don't have a use for, because it's a really phenomenally excellent little planetary telescope. Let's see, that one in the middle, that's right about here, is was a junk scope that I got a hold of. It is a Meade ETX 90 millimeter, and it was in a cradle in a Schmidt Cassegrain mounting. The mounting was no good. Hand controller was piece of garbage. So I took some bolts out, ended up with a tube. I put a dovetail base on it, as I briefly mentioned earlier. It's sitting on my CG4 mount, but it's got my Celestron zoom eyepiece in it. But the point here is that this little 90 millimeter scope, I was really shocked to find out what a super excellent telescope this is. It gives absolutely sharp, incredibly excellent images. And it's tiny, and it's lightweight, and it is easy for any beginner to use. So it's another one that might be small enough that somebody could have lying around in a drawer, broken, saying the hand controller doesn't work anymore, the mount is a piece of crap. It was pretty good maybe 20 years ago, but now it's a piece of scrap and I don't know what to do with it. And so again, I want you to know that the telescope loan program could put it to use as a telescope to loan out to beginners. One detail I want you to see on the lower right-hand image is a corrector plate for that telescope. So the arrow points out a spot. And so I know that a lot of older telescopes and eyepiece can get fungus type growth on the inside of the lens. It may be a coating deficiency where the coating is deteriorating. Maybe the coating is 30 or 40 years old. I don't know. I'm just taking a wild guess, but I've seen this on some eyepieces as well. So this spot here looks ominous on the corrector plate. However, despite that, this scope gives a really excellent image. You can't notice the spot. It might cause a slight decrease in contrast. Maybe if you compared it with a brand new one, you might be able to pick out, hey, there's a slight less, a patch of less brightening in this little area. But overall, this telescope, despite its deficiencies, is excellent, really good. Okay, so that's telescopes that I just pictured my own as examples that you might have lying around, or somebody might have lying around, think it's junk and not of any value, but it'd be of great value to the telescope loan program. Okay, I mentioned a few little deficiencies. So you may be familiar with a Rigel Quick Finder. So the one on that 4-inch Newtonian is this one right here, in case you're not familiar with the Rigel Quick Finder. And as I mentioned, it's tiny enough, I can't take it apart. I can't really fix it like I could with this Telrad. If you're familiar with the Telrad, the point here of this picture is that if you have any parts lying around in the drawer, and people may have these things and eyepieces and Kellner or Plossl eyepieces lying around in a drawer, figuring they're junk, and I don't know what to do with them. But so have some telescopes, not enough eyepieces to lend out with them. Anybody has old, okay, so I don't want these ones, right? So some telescopes, don't bother with these ones. Okay, so $30 or $29, and some telescopes, no, just keep them. I don't really want them, but I keep accidentally skipping forward to this slide. But go back to this one if we can do that. So the point was, the eyepieces especially are sort of things that people may have lying around in the drawer, figuring they're junk because if we replace them with some upgraded eyepieces, take your pick, Nagler's, Hyperion, etc. So anyway, the point is, if anybody has eyepieces lying around, I think that they're not good. They're quite useful. I could use them with these telescopes. I pointed out the Rigel Quick Finder. So I'm just saying, if anybody has one lying around not being used, I could put it to use immediately on that 4-inch telescope that needs one, that has a mount on it. I could also take this, I could also take this Telrad, which is my own. It's one of about 5 or 6 that I didn't get rid of, didn't sell a few years ago when I found out a good way to not need them anymore. So this one's cracked, broken, it's cracked, but it still works. And so I could put a base on that telescope and put this Telrad on it if I need to get it operational. So I'm not sure yet if it's a good idea for me to drill holes or do any permanent damage to that telescope tube, which is really nice. So anyway, we'll see what happens. Somebody might come forward and donate a Rigel Quick Finder that will replace it. Keep bumping ahead to that. I wanted to point out the Schmidt Cassegrain I pointed out that was donated recently has a few other slight little problems. I may have mentioned it, the hand controller is missing. I pointed out on the first slide, no star diagonal, and that's fine. I got a few of them. I could easily put one of my own on, and it's again, it's a sort of thing down here that anybody could have lying around in the drawers and figure, hey, I've upgraded mine to dielectric or 2-inch or whatever, and this is just lying around and there's no use for it. So finders also useful. The point about these bolts here is that if you're familiar with an 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain telescope, the one that I've been loaning out for a couple of years has 3 of these bolts to go on the base. And so you set up the tripod, it's got a wedge on it. You take a bit of muscle and you hold that telescope and you put 3 bolts into the base of it, and then you slide it into the wedge. And it's fairly easy, so I've been able to train any of the telescope borrowers to do that. Even the very small ladies can do it without too much trouble. However, the new one came not with 3 of these thumb bolts, which are, darn it, not 3 thumb bolts, which were original equipment that came with that Meade. But this one came with a bag containing 3 half-inch bolts. One's a bit longer than the other with some flat washers for spacer and a half-inch wrench. And so I think it's a bit more of a stretch to train somebody borrowing that telescope to use for the first time to put 3 bolts in it and tighten them in with a wrench. It's a bit of a stretch. So I'm just pointing out these bolts that if anybody has these lying around for any reason, again, I can put them to use immediately if they're looking for a home. The other detail on this to illustrate is one example of a chart book I put in here. So anybody that has beginner's charts or beginner's books also lying around, and you want to donate, you think there's no use for it, again, I could put it to use. I could hand it out with those telescopes that I hand out to first-time telescope borrowers. So this one happens to be a Celestron Sky Guide map, which some of you may or may not recognize. Minor detail. If you have, there's a number of books that are pretty good for the purpose. Okay, anyway, I showed this one already. Say no thanks to some telescopes. Last slide. I mentioned telescope loaners in Toronto because I live in Pickering, and so I've had a number of people who've driven across Toronto from the west end of Toronto or beyond, excited to come and borrow a telescope, and some have said, "Oh man, do I got to drive all the way to Pickering?" And in my case, the answer, yes, do. 'Cause that's where I live. So I convinced one guy that asked that was a guy that has maintains the Dobsonian. I showed you the Dobsonian earlier, and I said to him, one solution is if you could become a volunteer yourself and loan it out to whoever wants to borrow it, you'd have full use of it anytime it's not being loaned out. So he thought that was a good idea. So he took the Dob and he's loaning out the Dob. But if anybody else wanted to do that, I'm saying there's a need for telescope loaners. It takes a little bit of time. You just respond to requests and you arrange to meet somebody somewhere. Train them. I find it takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes to train the person to set up the telescope and do it competently and sign a little bit of paperwork, and they have the telescope for a couple of weeks. We also need a telescope loan program administrator. That's because it's handy to have somebody starting to maintain, keep track of where all these scopes are at any one time, and also make official requests for more for the parts and telescopes that I mentioned. I'll be putting a few little notes on the forum in a couple of weeks coming up. I'm not willing to volunteer as the administrator. That's because I'm going to be taking some courses, starting to take some courses soon for a mathematics degree, and I'll be pretty busy. So there's some ways to contact us. You can contact me at my sort of email there, and you may try contacting the email on the TLP webpage of the Toronto Centre webpage, telescope loans, and it may work, but I pointed out that the website is not 100% perfect. So the current web administrator does a good job of forwarding on emails to us when he sees them, but sometimes he misses them, and so somebody can fill out the form to borrow a telescope, and it goes nowhere until the web administrator forwards it on to us. So there's some imperfections in place. So somebody could, if you have some stuff you want to donate, you could send it to the email address on the Telescope Loan Program website, but it may or may not get through. So you also have my email there as well. So that's all I wanted to say, Tom. And so don't think there'd be any questions. The point is, anybody who wants to donate anything, I want you to know that it would be put to use. Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
So if I wanted to loan out a telescope, how would it work? So I would come to you and email you and...
No, you look on the website. There's a
Okay.
Telescope Loan Program website on the Toronto Centre website.
Okay, I found it, yes.
And it shows these telescopes here, as well as a couple of other things. And so you fill out the form, and then you click submit.
So, and then do you know, like, how much is each telescope? Or is it free or...
Free.
Free?
Yep. It's a free service. I should have said that at the beginning. I should have given a better introduction. Telescope Loan Program provides telescopes free to members.
Amazing.
It's
much.
amazing. It's for 2 weeks
Thank you.
or longer. Some have borrowed it for a month or longer. I think it's phenomenal because people who've never used a telescope before can get one as a benefit of membership. And it's the reason I request people to step forward as telescope loaners is because it's really good. It's a really good feeling to get somebody excited to see a telescope for the first time, get their hands on a telescope.